everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Dance Talk Realness, a podcast where we discuss all nuances concerning education and dance, because a dance experience is an experience worth talking about. I'm your host, Truly B, my co-host, Daryl P, and today we are joined by our special guest, Mr. Matthew Cumbie.
Hi.
So excited to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And so before we jump into everything, today's quote is from a dear friend of mine who passed recently, Marcus White. And he says, retention of historically informed sociocultural knowledge is just as important as technical practice. So much love to him. He had a very major role in me being able to even complete my master's thesis. And even beyond that process is someone who definitely pushed me into the direction that I ended up going with all of my work. So forever grateful for having him in my life.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for sharing that, Truly.
Yeah.
So today, Daryl is in charge. Yes, I don't have to worry about it. I will jump in as I have questions, but you can take it away, sir. Yes, be responsible.
Yeah. It's so funny because it reminds me of, just having watched Hamilton for the first time, and I've actually watched it a second time since Friday. But no, it's funny because the king comes out in his second appearance and he's like, "Oh, George Washington's leaving. I didn't know that was a thing that someone could do. Just give up their responsibilities or their being in charge. That people could actually do that." So yeah, it's kind of fun that I get to be in charge today, I guess.
Handing the reins over.
Handing the reins over.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are here with Matthew Cumbie, a really good friend of mine, and today we're going to talk about the idea of being we're going to talk about being independent artists, artists making work, performing kind of, for ourselves on our own with our own resources, really, which I think all three of us have done in our time. So first I want to start off asking Matthew a question. Just tell us a little bit about your project that you have going on, Matthew Cumbie Projects, and give us a little bit about that.
Okay, yeah. Well, so Matthew Cumbie Projects, it's kind of the name I gave it, or the name that it has now. For now, it's an iteration. I like to think of the work that I do as iterative, and this is just one iteration of how I'm organizing my body of work. And I think the name Matthew Cumbie Projects came about around 2015. I was doing a lot of work with the organization that I used to work with, Dance Exchange, and also continuing to do my own work outside of the organization, and finding that I needed to, like, people love giving things a good name. It helps people hold on to something. And so I found myself looking for fiscal sponsorship as a way to start raising money for my work independently, and got that fiscal sponsorship, and in the process of that application landed on this kind of moniker of Matthew Cumbie Projects then. And so it's kind of stuck for the last 5 years or so. It might take another iteration in a future date, which is why I say it's iterative. It's what I do now. But yeah, Matthew Cumbie Projects, I do like thinking about it as a project. I actually really appreciate that framework, because I do think that, like a lot of the work I do, it is something that contains lots of different ideas, lots of different questions, lots of potentially different outcomes, but kind of organized around a central question or a central theme. And in this instance, it just happens to be like organized around what I want to do. And that these things kind of take many different years. But so Matthew Cumbie Projects is kind of the vehicle for the work I make in this current place and time, living in Washington, D.C., a lot of the work that I do is really grown out of an interest in an investment. Interesting, speaking of history, interest in an investment, like looking at particularly and specifically LGBTQ plus histories and how through dance and movement and text and then also collaborating with lots of different community members and community partners, we can actually give voice and vision to those histories, potentially revision those histories so that we can relate to the LGBTQ plus histories of this place, Washington, D.C., or the histories that we know in our bodies and in the communities that we're connected to, how we might find a different relationship to those through a performance and creative practice.
I love it.
It's a lot of words, but
no, but I love
like,
it. Like,
how I make my work right now.
no, because it definitely, just the way you describe it, it's just, the fact that you say that it's very iterative and that it's very changing. Like, I see, one, because the way you said it, two, also because I know you, is that I hear the changes that in the process that has taken you from where you were in 2015 to where that you are now in what is Matthew Cumbie project.
Yeah.
Project. So no, I definitely get it. I think that we all have called ourselves artists for a very long time, right? Like, I think that's something that, for me, going back and forth between calling ourselves maybe a performer, calling ourselves a dancer, calling yourself choreographer, but then, we call ourselves artists, right? And then you tack on independent artists in there, and it almost starts to sound scary a little bit, right? Like,
go ahead, take that almost out of there. It sounds scary. It's terrifying.
Yeah. So many questions came from that. So where do you, when you call yourself, or if you call yourself an independent artist, I don't know, what did you ever in your path to where you are now, was this something that you ever thought you would say, like, I want to be an independent artist one day? And
girl, no. I think this question has me thinking back actually to when we were in college, Daryl, and I'm thinking of at least one or two people we were in school with specifically who very early on, at least in my knowing them, made it quite clear that they wanted to have their own dance company and that they wanted to have their own kind of like movement vocabulary, technique, physical language, whatever you want to call it, like their own codified movement practice. And hearing that, both of those things, my immediate response has always been like, ew, no, why? Gross. I don't want that. I don't, and which is interesting because then, once I went through the different parts of my educational journey that brought me here and moved to New York, I certainly did find myself doing I think the language I use more often is like freelance or gig to gig, because I actually don't like using calling myself an independent artist. I think this idea of independent, of this idea or notion of being singular and this artistic genius, those are not necessarily things that I ascribe to or that excite me or that they actually make me really uncomfortable. And I don't think that they really speak to or do service to the work that I'm really excited about and really invested in, which is working in collaboration with lots of folks and really kind of grounding myself in the communities that I'm a part of and in the communities that also like help lift me up and help carry me when I can't carry myself. And so because of that, I actually much more often, either if I'm in a place where I'm like when I think back to my time in New York, I most often called myself a gig-to-gig or project-based artist, knowing that like my work was really defined by my participation in these different projects, whether I was leading them or others were leading them. And then, and more recently in the work that I currently do, I much more often call myself a collaborative artist or collaborative dance maker and artist educator, because I really want to speak to how central collaboration is in the processes that I'm a part of and or sometimes leading. And I do recognize that, yeah, I think that there are times where I'm really kind of at the forefront of a project, but I'm always also really interested in how to really cultivate creative spaces where I can step back, even if I might be at the helm at certain points. I'm really wanting to be in processes where I can also step back and listen and lead from the inside as well. So yeah, I think this idea of being an independent artist, that language for me, it also really speaks to capitalism. And I was on a call earlier this morning with Kahina Haynes at the Dance Institute of Washington, and we were talking quite a bit about the kind of current time and place that we're living in relationship to the global pandemic and in relationship to all of the uprisings and unrest across the country and around the world. And a lot of that conversation also centered around capitalism. And for me, I feel like that's there are certainly things about the systems that we're living in that have brought a lot of value to our country and to our communities, but also I think a lot of damage. And so for me, this idea of independent artist is potentially one of those capitalist ideas that I'm not super invested in, like this idea of the expert in the room, the artistic genius. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know does that answer the question that you were?
Yeah. No, definitely, for sure. Do you can you recall the first time you feel like you were in a room and you felt like you were a collaborator with maybe, you know, how you said that sometimes you don't always have to be the leader in the room, but having, you know, come up and receiving an MFA and doing a lot of work in New York, like when was the first time you felt like you really got to see a professional choreographer really kind of pull back and say, you know what, I'm not the person who's just feeding the information. I want to get information from everyone in the room to create.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think this is necessarily the first time. I mean, the person whose name kind of comes up immediately for me, and it was you know, a process that I was in not for a terribly long time, maybe a few months. But I was working when I was in New York. Those last few months, I was working with Paloma McGregor on this iterative project that she's been cultivating for a number of years now, called Building a Better Fish Trap, which has roots in, I won't be able to speak to the whole body of work and do it justice because I haven't been involved since 2011, but I know it's got roots in kind of her wanting to investigate the these ideas of memory in relationship to place and land, and also and looking at that also through the context of her father was a fish trap builder and fisherman in St. Croix. And so she often recalls these times where her father would build these fish traps. And so I got to be a part of a process with her, very improvisational in a lot of its exploration and in some of the performance, not all of it, but certainly some of it. And yeah, I remember being a part of that process and just kind of getting to experience how her deep curiosity around the questions that were brought into the rehearsal room, and sometimes the rehearsal room was a studio, sometimes it was her apartment, sometimes it was, I don't remember the name of the space, but it was this old building up in the Bronx that we performed in once, that at some point in its history was also a living facility for older adults. Had a very creepy vibe, but at sometimes we were rehearsing in there. Sometimes it was a park, right? So, and I just remember getting to, like, the profound excitement I had, like being a part of a process where like the curiosity that she had was such that she would offer a question, then step back and be like, I don't know what happens, y'all figure it out, and like really looking to the other collaborators to also step forward and help shape what was happening. That's not the first time that I've necessarily experienced that. I think my time in grad school, there were moments of that as well, but that's also complicated because then you're talking about like, student-teacher relationships and peer-to-peer relationships, undergraduate and graduate students, and so those kind of influences of power were also always present in the room in a way that I don't, it was just a different context than the work with Paloma, and then certainly other people that I've worked with since then.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hearing you say that too, it's like, just has me thinking about, allowing your students or allowing your dancers that you're collaborating working with to have a voice for to have a voice in your piece, or just have a voice for their opinion. And I think sometimes, I always imagine like if I were in a company in New York that like, I mean, nobody cares what I think about, we should do this instead of doing that. Like, I don't think anybody would care about me giving my opinion. But I think when you're in a collaborative space, it is important. It's helpful for to give your dancers, that voice, and even taking it back to education too, and doing what I do. Sometimes it's definitely like, I have my set of choreography and of steps that I want my dancers to do, and I can be in the middle of teaching something and the student will say, can we do this instead? And, some teachers might be like, no, this is what we're doing. I'm the one who's in charge. I'm the one with the knowledge. But, it's interesting what other people will see in your work or in what you're doing, and how they can help alter that and change that. Do you guys ever feel like you've ever been in a room like that where you've not been able to express your opinion or your voice? And if you were not able to, kind of what was the result of that? Did you, how did the performance go?
I would say yes.
Like, truly take it. Take it,
100%, multiple times. I'm thinking of one performance in particular that I was just a guest artist performing. And there was a moment where the movement that had been placed on us, we were just like, yo, this is not working. Like, it just, like, we're doing exactly what we're being told, and it's not clicking, it's not flowing with everything. What if we tried this? And man, that thing got shut down so fast. And it was like, all right. And it was very much from a place of, well, I'm the choreographer. I said you're doing this. So do this. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. And that's not to say I've never said it. I've said it where I'm like, but no, I know for a fact I want this. But to just, once it's been demonstrated, it's just not working though. As stubborn as I can be, even I'm like, okay, well, let's see what else we can do. Let's talk through it. Let's work through it, something, because obviously this isn't working. And I've watched you attempt this numerous times, and it's not that it's difficult, it's that it's just not working. So how can we move past this? But again, being from a similar background as the two of you, that I've had experience being taught like that and being in spaces like that, I think the difficulty comes in when you have people who don't have that, and kind of just trying to teach them the ways of being open.
Yeah.
Truly, yeah. What keeps coming up for me in response to this question, and certainly hearing about your different experiences, both in processes like that or how you lead process, has me thinking a lot about feedback and how feedback kind of comes in we're getting feedback all the time. So whether or not we ask for it, whether or not it's called feedback, it might just be like, the ways someone's body language is kind of reading, or how we're reading into a situation, like, oh, that doesn't look the way I thought it would. And how we engage with that feedback or don't, I think, is really what is one of the key ingredients, I think, of this idea of collaboration, right? And if we engage with that feedback in a way that like continues to foster curiosity and agency and excitement and investment in the work, then whether that's through asking a question like what you've just modeled, like, oh, that's not working, what else can we do? I feel like those create different avenues or pathways or portals forward. Whereas like if we don't engage with that feedback, like, no, that's not what's happening, I'm the choreographer, do it like this right now. Like for me, then it's not about collaboration, and it's really rooted in these ideas that I don't want to say older ideas, but more traditional, I guess I would say, ideas of like it goes back to that singular idea, like, I'm the choreographer, I'm the one in charge, I'm the expert in the room, with the one with the knowledge, and I'm here to like give that to you, and you are a vessel by which this message will come out, or a vessel by which I will then, like, impart my learning upon. I don't know. It's really interesting. But yeah, I can think of times I've been, well, no, that's not true. I'm having a hard time thinking of a really like clear, specific example of when I've been in that latter situation. And I think that's because I make the conscious choice when I start to experience spaces that don't value me and my ideas and all that I offer to a process. I'm very quickly like, all right, well, where's the door? Because I can't stay. And I think, yeah, I've known that. So I've known that about myself for a long time. And so I think because of that, I know I've experienced it, but I can't recall like exact examples or circumstances because it's been a little while.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's interesting too, because that that about yourself. When do you feel like that was like something that you said, you know what, I want how I feel and what I think to be valued in the space?
Do you want the real answer?
Yeah.
Yes. Dance, talk, realness.
Realness. Okay. So that real answer is I could not tell you the age, but sometime living with my parents. I know. So dance has not always been a part of my life, but I know that I've. Oh, this is interesting because I'm about to use a word that I had some resistance to even 30 minutes ago with us together. I've known for a long time that I have a sense of independence about me, that I don't like to be told what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And I know that from my just being the oldest of three boys and growing up in the house that I grew up in a suburb of Houston, and such that, like, especially as I was coming into high school and really starting to grapple with ideas around my sexual orientation and question a lot of different parts of my life. And as I was starting to think about, like, okay, well, I have to start thinking about college and what do I want to be doing? What do I see myself doing? What do my parents want me to do? Because that was also a big influence too. There was a lot of friction and tension, and especially between me and my dad. And so anytime my dad would like, he was very much the kind of person, I think, like a lot of dads are. This is no shade to my dad, but like a lot of father figures are. It was very prescriptive, like, well, no, this is what you do, and this is when you do it, and I expect it to be done by this time. And a thing he loved to say, which, ingrained in me a sense of perfectionism that I'm really trying to undo right now. But he used to say all the time, if you're going to do something, do it right the first time. And yeah, so I think all of these things, like, we would just have explosive fights all the time when I was a kid, and some pretty bad, like yelling, screaming, pushing at one point. It was not cute. Um, and so I think that is when I really recognized, like, okay, I definitely I have this like sensibility about me that like wants to be able to like be clear about when I'm doing it and why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it. And it wasn't until later, I mean, and I think that also is what led me towards eventually finding my way into this art form. Because it took me going away to college to feel the space to both claim my own kind of identity as a queer person, and then also I think I needed that space to really start to explore and expand what were the different activities and things I was involved in that really fed me and fueled me as a person, which is how I found dance. And um, so I've always had that like kind of like I'm going to strike out on my own to like figure this out. I'm going to be able to take care of myself. But I think that, yeah. So what was the question again, though? I feel like I've kind of gone on this tangent.
You're still on it. So it was that. When was that moment that you felt like, your opinion mattered, and that you wanted your opinion to matter when you were
Right.
in that collaborative process?
Thank you for bringing me back. So I think that all of that led me towards being a part of an artistic process, and I think it's like when I started becoming really involved in making art, and I would say even more specifically making dance, because it is a form that, like, because I think I was exploring dance and my sexuality around the same time, and because it's a form that uses the body, it was the first place I felt like I had full access to all parts of Matthew at that same time. And so I think it was around the time that I started making art and making dances with people that I really started to understand my voice mattered. Being in spaces where my voice was heard and acknowledged and appreciated mattered. And I think it's also around the same time that this idea of being independent or having independence really started to shift and change and get a little bit more complicated, rather than just striking out on your own and being like the kind of sole figure by yourself doing it, to being in a process where you're a part of a community and like your uniqueness really mattered, but that you also needed the contributions and the involvement of the community to make the thing you were making.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
It makes complete sense.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thinking on that, truly, I don't know. I feel like I still struggle with the, not necessarily having my voice in the room, but like, because there are times that I'm sure you both know that I will definitely have an opinion and will state the opinion. But I think that when I get into dance spaces, like I am less inclined to, on both sides of it. Like sometimes I think I'm good with working in a collaborative space. And I do enjoy that. I think some of the things I've choreographed things that I have presented over the last year and a half, that I've been able to really work with the people that I'm performing with, whether I am on stage with them or they are the ones on stage and I'm watching them. So I think that has been good, but a part of me, I guess, struggles with the traditional sense of being a choreographer, right? And that coming in the room and needing to be like, okay, this is what I have for you. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Let me see it 5,000 times. Okay, I'm pleased. Goodbye. And I wonder, because I mean, you guys are both have been in collegiate spaces. Is that something? Because I mean, I felt and Matthew and I went to undergrad together at Texas State University. I definitely felt when I was in that space. I don't know if I don't know if I necessarily had a choreographic voice at that point, or I'm not going to do that, or not that I'm not going to do that. What if we did this? Maybe in student to student, but what we were talking about that too, right? Like to student, or professor to student. Like maybe that relationship just doesn't produce itself to be very like a conversation for movement, but. Yeah, I don't know. I lost my train of thought on that. But anyhow, do you think that in collegiate spaces, do you think students are working in collaboratively with student to student, professor to professor, or do you think it's still very much that traditional, here is this technique, here's what I'm going to teach you, and do you still find value in that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'll jump in and I'll say, I mean, I think it depends on where you're at and what
Mm-hmm.
program you're in and the values that kind of undergird that program and who's on faculty, all of those things. Um, and I think it's important to ask the question, do you still find value? Because I actually do think, yes, there's an incredible amount of value going into um, whether it's a studio class or choreographic work. There's a lot of value to be found, I think, in having somebody claim that central leadership position and be like, this is what we're doing. Get ready, here we go. Like I'm thinking, actually, uh, this last week, this last week I started taking ballet online again, and really because I'm, in this pandemic, I'm trying to figure out a regular physical practice that will give me life, that will engage my body and keep me working, and that I can do in my own home without too much injury. And I was really excited to find out that the woman who taught all of my ballet classes in graduate school, her name is Shelly Padilla. She lives in Dallas, Texas. If you're ever in the same vicinity or geographic location as her and are able to take her class, do it because she's incredible. And one of the things I appreciate about her, I bring her up because I think she is one of those people, and ballet is certainly a form where it does value a kind of central figure. There is a body of knowledge, a body of work that we all ascribe to, and we've all bought in and said, yes, you, teacher, are the person that's going to give me feedback, and I'm not here to like change the form or tell you, actually, can we do those tendus differently? Like I'm here to do what you are offering. And that's kind of, I think, like part of the code that we agree to when we step into that studio. And I will say, this is interesting because I really appreciate that end of the spectrum as well, being in those processes, but there has to be like a level of trust and a level of investment in the person who's leading that process. I know for myself, there's a handful of people that I would take a ballet class from, and Shelly Padilla is like at the top of that list, and so that's why I'm doing it these mornings. But I think, to go back to your point too, Daryl, thinking about, where we went to school,
Mm-hmm.
um, and like how we entered into that dance program. Neither of us had a lot of training prior to that. And then
Right.
I think about where I did my graduate studies at Texas Women's University, and I think there's a similar it's a similar environment or makeup of environment, in that there's like people that have like years and years and years of training, and then people that are just coming to the form. And so I think it makes for a really, when you're entering into like a creative process, I think you certainly could, and I've seen people use the model or the framework of like, I'm the choreographer, you are the dancers, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here's what we're gonna do. Um, Personally, I have a harder time. I think I'm with you in that, like, I get into the room and I'm like, there are so many different, like, there's so much different information in each of the bodies in this room, and so much different information coming into this studio space that I don't know what to do. Bleh. So to step into that framework, it just feels like a lot of pressure, too much pressure for me to even feel like supported creatively. Whereas if I go to the other end of the spectrum, which is where, again, I'm more comfortable, and acknowledge that there is so much information in the room and that the work is going to be better because of all of the information and all of the ideas mixing together and changing and evolving and growing. If I think of myself more as a facilitator of a creative process and less as like the sole decider of creative process, I feel like there's much more possible.
Yeah. Do you think students in undergrad and graduate programs are getting that experience of like being able to work collaboratively with, like, do you think like now those doors are open for that?
I do. I guess I wonder, and I'd be really curious to hear Truly's thoughts too, because Daryl, you and I have a lot of a shared history, and Truly, I don't even know where you went to school, or so I'd be really curious to hear that too. But I do think that students, again, depending on where they're at and what they're interested in, are at least becoming aware of, if not introduced, and perhaps even like grounded in some of that information and some of those practices. I just don't. Again, I think there's questions around power dynamic that come up in an educational environment, and I think it really also hinges on like, what do we mean by collaboration, and what are our specific ways into collaboration? Because how I collaborate, I would wager, is different than how you collaborate, or how Truly collaborates, or how the neighbor down the street collaborates. So I mean, I think it's like it's a wide palette. It's almost like a delta, and there's all these different inlets in. So
Yeah.
I will say I agree wholeheartedly with the statement of it depends on where you are. I can say for me personally, and it may just be my preferred learning and teaching style, I see a lot of value in tradition and like, here is this information, learn this thing exactly like this verbatim. But I think it's how you approach that tradition. That if I'm approaching teaching it from the standpoint of, I'm right, you don't know anything, do it exactly the way that I do it, or why are you here? That is different from me approaching it as, okay, this is a form that has existed for a while. I am giving you some core fundamental things. So when I tell you to split off from this, you know what you're splitting off from. And you can make more informed decisions in the process of splitting off. I would say all of my instructors have not been about that life, but that's fine. Bless them along their pathways.
As they come and as they go.
As they come and as they go. Bless them. So Matt, just background on me. My BFA is dance education from East Carolina.
Oh yeah.
So we're pirates. I don't have school. There's that. They just sent me another like thing in the mail that I need to like join the alumni association. I'm like,
no,
you're good. My MFA is from Hollins.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. So
awesome.
I will say completely different experiences in those two places. Way different. East Carolina, there were a lot of other factors that were in place.
Mm-hmm.
I am choosing these words carefully.
I can hear that.
That I did not experience at Hollins. Now, the racial makeup was very similar.
Mm.
But the racial intelligence was not.
Mm.
Let's see, I was at ECU early 2000s, and I'm like, yo, y'all still on this? What? It's a new millennium. What? Like, what are we doing? Y'all are stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I can see still pieces where anyone who had any type of melanin, they're in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like default. Like, you just know that's where they're going to be. If you're looking for your friends, you know where to find them. They're in the back row. And it was just like, y'all still on this? Okay, that's cool. It's not, but live your life. We did it was like for my stage management class, a production rendition of Guys and Dolls. I love Guys and Dolls. But there's that one scene that is... So I just want to clarify the fact that I'm not going to make the sound that the other student in the room made, but it was a sound that is usually stereotypically associated with those of Mexican descent. But he was making it in reference, and I'm like, what, that seems in Havana? And I'm like, you know, all Hispanic people ain't the same. Like, you know, these are different locations. Like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like me and like maybe two other like people of color though. We're just sitting there like, well, all right. No. But that mentality was also in how we were instructed. That it was just like, well, this is how it's always been done. And this is the way. And it's like, no, I don't like it. So that was interesting. But then to flip to the Hollins experience, where it was just so like, it was like culture shock for me the first summer I was there, because I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I am accustomed to being just told, do it like this. And then I do it like that. And then I get my A. We're done. And they were like, yeah, no, but we're going to discuss this. Let's talk about how this movement feels. And I'm like, oh. So actually, so me contribute. Oh, okay. All right. I guess I'm gonna have to work through this. I did have a teacher though. I will give credit where it is due. Roger Bellman at ECU. I had him for modern and improv, and he drove me crazy one year. It was a whole situation. I have a friend who, if she's listening to this, she knows what happened. I'll tell y'all about it later because it was ignorant as all get out. But that aside, actual instruction, he was the most consistent in insisting upon we have a voice and we think for ourselves in the process of doing things. And so to go from just having 1 out of 4 years to everyone is like that. And I'm just like, I don't, tell me what you want me to do. Like, cause that's how I've been taught. And so I will say the way I teach now is influenced by that, because I'm like, yeah, no, my students need to be able to think. Like, yes, you should know this information, but you should also be comfortable enough to ask the question that if it's not working, to say, hey, so this isn't working. What if we did this? And then as the quote unquote choreographer, that if they're ever in that position, that they'll be okay hearing that they can get that feedback and not take it as a personal attack. Right. But instead is like, oh, okay, I had this idea. It's not necessarily that the idea was bad. It's just that it's not working. Like, this may not just be the idea for this moment. Put it on a shelf. You can pull it off later. I don't know. Did I go off topic? I don't know. Child, okay.
Yeah, not at all. No. And what I really appreciate about in hearing that truly is like this idea of nimbleness that comes up in terms of like how we practice our artistry right now. Because I want to like lift up and celebrate like that traditional ways of teaching and making are also incredibly valuable. I think it really just depends on the context, and it depends on like what you feel like individually as an artist, as a maker, as a mover, you need to show up and do your best work. And again, and for me, interestingly enough, that like it comes back around to that like that notion of feedback, and how do we give feedback? How do we receive feedback? What about that helps us, and what about that hinders us in this process?
And I mean, that's a life skill also. Many a person in this world, it's like, but did you ever learn how to take feedback? Because I don't think you learned. Like, this is valuable. Like, but I think part of the issue is that it has survived so long without that being at the forefront across the board, I would say. So that's a generalization, but you know what I mean. That it's hard to kind of break into that without people thinking you're saying, well, get rid of the tradition. Right. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen, that when people are pushing back. And I'm like, no. At least I know for me and the people who I'm usually working with, I'm like, oh no, tradition is still important. But there's more to that picture of that tradition. So can we get more of this picture instead of just honing in on this one little segment? And so it's just kind of hard getting people to kind of let go a little bit, like let go without throwing away.
Right. Well, and then also to acknowledge that tradition, people enter into tradition really differently depending on like, and I'll use the example that we've been using, like in a studio class, right? Like if this tendu isn't working for you in this way, what is a different way that we can approach it to get to that same concept, to get to that same pattern, but without doing harm and in a way that makes it feel more possible for you.
Yes. Like, I think that exactly that idea of, okay, how else can we approach this where you're still getting the same thing? And I think that's a breaking point for people. Like that exact example of a tendu. First of all, Dara already knows this. Anyone who knows me knows this. Me and ballet, not friends. It's horrible every time. Struggle bus. But like just something as simple as a tendu. And I had a teacher who, she can remain nameless. It was like, she was just like, nah, but do it. I was like, but I need you to explain this some other way. I don't get it. This doesn't feel good. I don't comprehend how my body's supposed to do this thing. And it was always struggle. So, and that was like early on. So that's just been the shadow cast over me in ballet ever since. But then, and I feel bad because I can't remember who said it to me. Feel bad because it was the one thing that worked. So the idea of massaging the floor. And I was like, yo, what? Why didn't you say that to me from the jump? I would have understood that. I would have understood that concept and how that is still me stretching all the way through without the struggle that you gave me. I have a whole complex now. And all you had to do was find another way of approaching the exact same concept. But that's also why everybody shouldn't be a teacher. Throw that out there.
I said what I said.
Said what I said.
Said what I said.
Because off topic, let me be clear. There was a professor at East Carolina. Again, I'm trying not to be petty. So, first of all, you as a professor have no business saying this. Second of all, this quote, what I learned through research, is taken out of context quite often. Those who can do, those who can't teach. First of all, if I can't do it, why am I trying to teach you? Because I can't do it. So I don't have the capacity, the wherewithal, the skill set to give it to you. So why am I teaching it to you?
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Said what I said.
Thank you.
That all happened at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina, just so y'all are clear.
We're not here to drop names, but we're going to drop some names.
Yeah.
That's where it's at. Yeah.
At least one of them still there. At least one of them.
You know who you are.
I hope she do. I hope she do. That'd be on my spirit sometimes. Because I'm like, that is the dumbest thing ever to say to somebody. Because I'm like, but if I can't do it, how am I going to teach you how to do it?
Wait. They told you that in college?
Yes. They were talking to those of us who were education majors. I remember being reprimanded for changing from performance to education because my thought process was, if I'm good enough for the gig, I'm good enough for the gig. But what I can't do is just go up in somebody's school and start teaching and keep that job without being certified. And that has benefits for sure. Like I know every 2 weeks I get a paycheck. I have health insurance. I already had a kid. I was like, y'all, we gonna do this smart route. But I still wanted to take like upper level performance classes because I'm like, I still want to actively do work, but I also need health insurance because,
I am so tired of, and this might be a read on higher education and a lot of dance programs in this country, but I'm just so tired of this distinction between art as a performance practice and art as an educational practice, because I see these two as really integral to one another. Like if I'm going to make if I'm going to make a dance about something, I better learn something in that process. So therefore there are educational components within that. And and this is more of a personal preference, but I really enjoy thinking about how to open up my making process to bring other people in, like whether you're the audience or it's through a workshop or it's like it's a lost opportunity, I feel, to not engage the pedagogical practice in the creative practice, because it's all part of the research. It's all helping me, if I'm really truly invested in understanding something differently through the act of making, then to approach that from the, like as artists, we love abstraction, to abstract that and then to like bring that back into a literal meaning. There's a lot of value in that, but then also like, what does it mean for me to try to like help someone else understand this or ask them what their understanding of it is? It's going to contribute to my own research, and it's hopefully going to like shift someone else's perception of whatever it is we're grappling with too. And so I just think we're doing ourselves and our field a disservice when we continue to perpetuate this myth that making dance and teaching dance are altogether separate, because they are not at all.
Are not, because first of all, who got there without any teacher? Who did it? Let me know. I'd love to talk to them because I've not met the person yet. But also those who really genuinely love their field are always doing something in it. So I'm like, we're really doing the same thing, just from a different angle.
Right.
It should not be separated.
Like, it's a spectrum, and like you can you can move. It's just, again, this idea of nimbleness, like moving from one to the other. Like you don't always have to live in one space in the field. You can actually, I believe, because we are complex people, we can hold on to multiple interests at the same time. We are complex people. We can like hold on to multiple things at the same time. So I can be interested in being a professional artist and making work and performing work, and I can be interested in being a badass teacher and studio instructor.
Correct.
And those things don't have to exclude one another or cancel the other one out.
Right. Oh my gosh.
So
like, why is that such a hard thing to comprehend?
Yeah. I wonder if it's like, could just think how much a university could potentially save if like it's not an education track, a performance choreography track, but like just a education choreography performance track, and you do everything, because like you said, eventually I feel like, even for me, who did a more educational track, like I feel like I've been interested in doing. I guess I didn't have to, but I've found myself in places where I've done both the education, both the choreography performance, which I totally agree with both of you that it's like, it sounds like I'm saying the same thing twice when I say those things, because it's like, how am I not educating by being a choreographer or performer? But yeah, I'm curious as to why universities make that distinction for their dancers, because it really does lead the students to kind of think, well, like, oh, I don't want to do, one or the other is wrong, one or the other is like not quote unquote, it's not for me, when you never know where you might find yourself a year after you graduate. Like, you just, I don't know.
I think, I mean, and I will contextualize this by also saying, like, I haven't done a lot of specific research on, like, the history of the academy and the university system and how that has evolved over time. Haven't done that specific research myself, but I have done a lot of work working with different university programs across the country, and a kind of common theme I have found is that universities often operate in these really distinct and, I would say, damaging silos. Like, because faculty are often caught up in the rat race of trying to get tenure and keep their job security and all of the complicated parts that go into that. I don't know the full extent of it, but, you know, like, there's a lot that they have to do to prove their merit and to prove their worth to get to that tenure point. And I would say, especially in the arts, when we're talking about a field that is harder to quantify. So you've got the professors who are set up to essentially not succeed because they have to, like, operate within the system and prove their worth and their value in a system that's already being like, well, I don't really know that I value what you do. And then the distinctions between, like, we have the School of the Arts, and we have the School of Theology, and we have the School of Social Work, and the School of Math. I don't know. You have all of these different disciplines, and we approach it like that, like, oh, I'm in this discipline, and therefore I can't be in this discipline. I mean, I think we as people are automatically wired. We like to, for many of us, I'd say maybe not all of us, but we like to categorize and organize, and that can sometimes feel like an Olympic sport. And like you can call something one thing, and then tomorrow wake up and realize, like, oh, actually it could be moved over here, or I could call that differently, right? So, like, we like to create distinctions, but when you set it up in a system like the university, those systems actually can't move around as much as, like, say, if I were to write it on a note card and put it on the bed in front of me, like, I can move that around. These become much more, we're talking about, like, hundreds of years of history that have really solidified these systems, so that, like, asking someone who's really caught up in this tenure track journey to then also be like, oh, can you also, in addition to, like, your teaching load and your, like, professional work that you're having to do to like prove your merit and prove your worth here, and then probably, like, the committee work you do, probably if you're a person of color, you're also going to help us diversify our entire campus, so let's, like, add that and not pay you for that. In addition to all of that, can you also then collaborate with, like, people on the other side of campus that you've never had a conversation with? We're not going to do anything to help facilitate that. We're just going to ask you to do that on your own. So go, right? So, like, this has been something that I've experienced time and time again on different university residencies I've had, where the organization I was with or myself am brought in to help catalyze these kind of cross-campus or, you know, heaven forbid, campus and community collaborations. And it's really, my work, I feel like, is just about getting people in the room, because once that happens, then people recognize, like, oh, we aren't that different. Like, even though I'm a biologist and you're a theater maker, there's still a lot that we can do together, but without being in the room together and without having a reason to be in the room together, those kinds of cross-pollinating conversations don't really ever happen. And so then I think when you have that as, like, the larger structure to operate within, for me, it makes sense as to why, like, when we get into a dance program, we start to be like, okay, well, we're gonna, further distinguish and further kind of organize and specify into, all right, well, you're going to go the choreography track, and you're going to go the performance track, and you're going to go the teaching track, and you're not actually going to get to do all of them, because why would you? Even though in the real world, we know that that's not true. Like, we get out into the real world, and like, if you're going to make it, especially as like a kind of gig to gig artist, or even as like somebody who's got an amazing job teaching and making work, like, you're still going to be doing all of these things, because we are complex people and we can hold on to many different interests and ideas at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting too that, we've centered a lot of the conversation, thinking about being a independent artist collaborator, and, just in the time that we're in now with COVID, and, things that were traditional are no, I mean, how we have traditionally functioned in the dance realm, we are finding that we are having to alter very quickly, and what seems like might be something that will be temporary, there might be some things that are going to have to be ingrained permanently, and so, for someone who is, potentially going off, like graduating college, and maybe they were that performance choreography major, and that those auditions they thought they were going to go on post graduation are now like null and void. What would be some advice that you would give to someone who might be thinking, I'm not getting the gigs aren't there, but I have a voice and I want to be able to share that. What kind of guidance or advice would you give someone in kind of making that leap or that jump?
Right. That's an interesting question, and it makes me think about some conversations I've been having about pretty weekly, actually, for the last month or so, with a number of artists here in the DC area. A friend of mine and a local dance maker, Tariq O'Mealy, has been organizing a number of folks to join on a Zoom call and kind of not so much have these conversations and grapple with these questions in relationship to people coming out of school, although that has come up, but more so to like really think about, how do we as artists respond to this time, and what does that mean for our community here in this area specifically? And one of the things that has come up in conversation, one of the things that I feel strongly in my body and in my bones, and I have to remind myself in this time where I know, even for myself, my work, and I've been a practicing artist now for a while. The gigs that I'd lined up for myself, the work that I was doing, isn't happening in the same way anymore, which means that I'm having to also like reassess, what does my work look like. And so the thing I would offer people kind of entering into the field in this moment is, like, understand that your artistry is something that you carry with you all the time, and that if you have to get a job at a hardware store or pick up work as a telemarketer or an online fundraiser, or or at your grocery store, whatever that work looks like, understand that your artistry doesn't diminish because you're doing something different. It actually, if you're open to influence, I think that doing things outside of how you define your art making actually can inform your art making. That would be one thing. And then I think the other thing that I would offer is goes back to this idea that we've talked about a couple times around nimbleness, and just understanding that I think to be a practicing artist in the field right now, and especially right now where there's so much uncertainty. I mean, I think as artists, we are primed for responding to uncertainty. Like, being in a creative process, you enter the room, you don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know that I don't know that that's necessarily everybody's experience who's not making art. Like if you walk into a job as like a I don't know, a software engineer or I don't know, I'm trying to come up with some good examples, like a grocery store manager. I don't know that there's a whole lot of uncertainty that you have to necessarily navigate or that you've been prepared to navigate. Whereas I think as artists, we've been prepared. Like our training has taught us, like especially for those of us who have ever had an improvisational practice or at least have had improvisation kind of woven into other traditional forms, we know that uncertainty is part of the game, and we know that like there's information in listening and then making a decision, whether that's in a physical practice or a life practice. And so I think, yeah, as artists, we are primed for this. And I would say, or kind of refer back to these ideas we've had around nimbleness and just that we need to understand that things are going to change rapidly and that the future is really unknown and that how our work needs to look at any given point moving forward might be drastically different than what we thought before. And so how do we harness the energy as movers, as people that are used to moving our bodies in space rather quickly? How do we take that same energy and figuratively be ready to move our work in space in a different way, whether that's online or if we have to gather socially in radically different ways. I don't know what that looks like, but I think we can figure that out. I think we have the capacity to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all come from that, just that basic show must go on kind of attitude. You know what I mean? Like, at whatever, whatever happens, no sound, no music, no missing a dancer, missing a leg, missing a foot, missing a toe. The show still has to happen. And so I think that gives us that perseverance to just kind of say, we just have to be creative. It's all about being creative at this point. So yeah.
And sometimes, I think sometimes, I mean, we all find different portals into creativity, but I think we all have the capacity to be creative. I think every person has that within them.
Yeah.
Of course.
And I think sometimes we like to frame creativity as this like, oh, I need freedom. I need no any sort of box to be put in. I just need like the space to be free and creative. I think there's, again, it's this idea of, it's a spectrum, right? There's like that camp on the spectrum. And I think also if we actually put a lot of parameters on something and really tighten the frame, a lot of creativity can be sparked or grow out of responding to constraint.
Yeah. And I love your message about, if you're doing something outside of, your art is still as important. Because I always just remember, when you moved to New York and the work and the jobs that you did, just to make it through, which I was just like, anytime I told people like, yeah, I have a friend, Matt, he's in New York. He is working for this grassroots job, getting signatures in Times Square,
Grassroots organizer for a time being, working at a very bougie dog daycare for a time being, working at a pottery barn for a time being, working at a community college. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And that was like an hour commute.
The college?
Yeah, wasn't that?
Yeah, so where I was living in Brooklyn, and it was about an hour on a weekday because it was a combination of taking the train the Jay-Z train all the way to the end and then transferring to a bus for the last part of the journey. So on a weekday it was about an hour, but then I was also teaching a modern dance movement class on the weekend, and it was a good hour and a half each way.
Yeah.
It was a good time to read, and it was a good time to like plan my class and do my grades. It was like, I was here for it.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I moved here to DC. I was like, yeah, it'll be great. And then I was like, those hour-long bus rides, I was like, I'm just ready to be home. It's time to get a car.
Well, but you also, you're also teaching like a full-on day, and you are there from like, I don't pretend to know what time you get to school. I think it's in some hour that I would rather not be at.
Hour.
I don't know how y'all do it.
It is.
So, and you're there until like 4 or 5 o'clock
Correct.
at the earliest.
Yeah.
Whereas like I was teaching an hour and a half. I would, like roll up to my class at 11, be done by 12:30, and then have the whole afternoon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very different.
It is.
It's a different life. I tell you, switching from one to the other.
I bet.
Amazing.
I bet.
I was like, I have the afternoon. I don't even have anywhere to go, and I'm like, but I'm gonna go somewhere because I am now free to go where I take all the doctor's appointments. Taking my kids out of school. That was raggedy. I was wrong. But I was like, but I'm free now. Everybody's out of school. Come on, guys, let's go. They did not want to go. But it is a lovely switch. That commute, though, is still pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of brutal, but like you said, it gives me time to kind of think through some things. And I have definite enough time to kind of decompress.
Right. But again, different context. You're driving, so you were like, you are not just responsible for like the lesson planning and the grading, but you're also responsible for getting yourself there safely and getting yourself home safely. Whereas I was on a subway and on a bus, so not responsible for any of those things.
Right.
True. That's fair. Man, I would have been taking all the naps.
I mean, it happened. It did happen.
Yeah.
And there was a lovely, I remember when I'd get off the bus stop, and if I went right half a block, there was a Dunkin' Donuts that I could go grab a cup of coffee at, and then go back to the bus stop and keep going like another couple blocks to get to the campus. It was a great gig.
I would have been there.
It was a great gig.
All the time.
Yeah.
They would have got all my money at that Dunkin' Donuts.
Mm-hmm. Queensboro Community College. Really great program, really great school.
Yeah.
Tucked away, kind of like you see the New York City landscape in the distance when you're at the football field. I think it was a football field, whatever sports field that was there. You see the landscape, but then you kind of go back on campus, and it like a lot of campuses, it's both I think problematic because it feels not of the community, but then also nice in that it helps I think focus the community of the school itself, and it was a really lovely experience.
Okay, it's nice to find a type of balance with that. My current location, child, we're in the middle of nowhere. It ain't nothing to do. Like even the kids would say that. They was like, man, there's nothing to do. If you don't have a vehicle, you are stuck. And I was like, oh, sucks for y'all. I'm going home. Like I can't be out here like this. Because even on the drive, it's like it's beautiful, but there's nothing to do. So me as like adult, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. It's nice, calming ride. But I'm trying to picture myself at 17, 18, 19. I'll be pissed. Like, there's no club. Like there's a club on campus.
Oh, that's cute.
That reminds me of...
Thank you. I was like, well, that's adorable, but y'all not gonna let me really.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I mean, I do appreciate that they do put in the effort to try to create these outlets for the students. But I will say it is an honors college, and so it is very much that idea of within the community of the school, we're trying to focus you in this type of way. So I get it. But child, let me tell you who it couldn't be. Could not. It wouldn't be my testimony. Yeah.
That reminds me. Yeah.
So, you got any more questions, Daryl, before I cut up and like ruin lives?
Yes, do it.
Oh, that's right.
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 All right, so Matt, it is time for our ultimate dance trio.
I'm so
okay,
scared.
I always be telling people I promise the question isn't that bad, and then they be looking at me like,
bring it. Let's do it.
Yes. So, what are 3 choreography ideas that you would love to try implementing that you haven't had an opportunity to use yet? And it can be movements, music, concepts, anything that you would love to try, but you've not had the opportunity yet. So no redos.
Okay. Clarifying question.
Yes.
Is it... are we thinking specifically about like kind of choreographic elements, or is it like, could it be a project that we haven't had the chance to dig into yet?
All these things.
All of the things. Okay, great.
Yeah, all of them.
Cool. So yeah, there have been a couple of, and Daryl knows a little bit, I think, about both of these ideas. There have been a couple of projects that have been percolating for me the last couple of weeks, somewhat in response to some potential grant opportunities, but then also more so, I think, born out of A, relationships that I have, and B, just the kind of current conditions we're living in, where we're not really going anywhere and things are closed. And so in both of these ideas, though, I think one of the things that I've done a lot of site specific, site adapted, like site contextualized or community specific work in my time, especially with Dance Exchange. But I've yet to be like, I've always been a part of the process. It's never been like, oh, this is something that I want to see happen, right? And so both of these ideas are really, I would say, community specific and site specific. One idea that I've been cooking around with and talking to a few folks in my neighborhood about is the possibility of making some sort of performance tour that is that happens in our neighborhood, and that kind of is celebrating the neighborhood, but also bringing, because our neighborhood, I don't know actually how much you know about our neighborhood. We live in Edgewood, which is this really lovely, very, it's an older community, older in that like it's been around here in the DC area for a long time. It grew out of an estate that this rich white man had, he was like the secretary of the Treasury for Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
And so when
I love that you know this about this neighborhood. But go
yeah,
ahead.
girl.
Yeah.
Samuel Chase was his name, and when his and then it passed on to his daughter, and when she wasn't able to like really take care of it or want to take care of it, the estate got kind of broken apart and sold, and started the development process for what is now Edgewood, the neighborhood we live in here in DC. And so it's got a lot of history, and it's kind of squeezed in between other neighborhoods in the area that have experienced kind of rapid gentrification. And I've been living here for 8 years, and I've really loved how different in that, like, it actually feels like a neighborhood. It feels like we've not really been all that impacted by the larger changes surrounding us, although that's starting to also shift and change here. And so, yeah, I've been really excited to think about what would it be like to use performance as a vehicle to bring people into conversation and reflection around like the changes that are happening, and to reflect on whether this is what we want or not. And also as a way to celebrate like the incredible people that live here. And so that's one idea. The other idea I've been thinking about too is I've been doing a lot of work before COVID-19. I was doing a lot of work teaching movement classes, weekly movement classes at the Whitman Walker Health Clinic, which is a local LGBT affirming healthcare center. And so another idea was, again, thinking about like what would it be like to use performance as a vehicle to celebrate the staff, the healthcare providers, and the patients at Whitman Walker, and to kind of animate the incredible history, but also the stories of people that are currently a part of that organization. So very kind of similar, I'd say, like similar interests, just very different context. Within that, I've been thinking a lot about kind of stretching some things out over a distance. So like, and having audience, I don't know, or people that are experiencing the work maybe on one end or like along it. And what does that do? Like kind of seeing something happen from someone that's much closer to you to someone that's farther away, kind of giving that perspective. And yeah, so thinking a lot about that as an actual like movement device. And what else am I thinking about? Something that I haven't... You know what? I've never actually also worked with a live musician in performance, and that's something that I'm really interested too in some of the work I'm doing. So
Yes.
Yeah.
So fancy. We have a lot of similar ideas.
We should talk. We should talk.
He's in my head right now. Yes, I love this. Like literally all of those things have been kind of just knocking around. So we'll talk.
Yes, ma'am. Let's do it.
Right. Awesome. So thank you again, Matthew, for joining us. We loved having you.
Thank you for having me. This was such a highlight of whatever day we're on. It's a highlight
It's okay.
of my week.
Yeah.
You know, it's in the week. We're in July. I got that much for you.
It is
that, still 2020.
I momentarily forgot. Okay, well, we need to get through this one.
We're still here.
2020 needs to go. Put it down. It's done.
Like it's still happening.
Nope. I reject that.
Like, and Daryl, thank you for taking charge.
Yeah, I got that.
Appreciate you. And thank you all for joining us here yet again at Dance Talk Realness. Be sure to follow us across all the platforms. Daryl's going to check me if I miss anything. We have Facebook, Instagram, never Twitter, Apple Podcasts. Did I miss anything? Am I tripping? YouTube. Wow. Sis.
YouTube. Yes.
Sis. The struggles be real. Yeah, I'm tired. Look, it's July 2020. I don't know what's going on anymore. The struggle's been real. But if you have any questions for us or for our awesome guests, please be sure to drop them either under the YouTube videos, on Instagram, or also on Facebook. We'll be sure to answer them, pose them to our guests, and get them back to you. And we'll continue to bring you fresh new content. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.